This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hey everyone, I'm Jason Morgan, Content Director for Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today we're talking with Nick Pittenger, Vice President of Data Services at Decisive. Nick, great to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you as well, Jason.
So as you do, which we always appreciate, Decisive brings us exclusive quarterly truck service data. We've been doing this for a while now, I feel like, maybe even years plural, I feel like, and we're diving into Q1 2025 service data here. Let's just kick it off right there. When you're looking at the service volume in Q1, how is this comparing to some of the previous quarters we've discussed?
Well, service activity continues to increase, and for the last quarter is up by a notable amount, roughly 10.3%. And over the past year, it increased by a nearly similar amount of 6.8%. Given the tariff uncertainty in Q1 that likely drove up freight tonnage and consequently mileages, the size of the increase is not that surprising to us. Looking forward, it'll be interesting to see how different service activity factors affect whether service activity starts to fall due to lower freight volumes, or if we continue to see increasing service activity levels from fleets delaying vehicle purchases and putting mileage on older equipment.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to take the latter on that. I think because remember, we're talking about Q1, right? So given the really tough time that new truck sales have had, I'm going to take the latter on it, and I'm just going to throw out there that I think we'll see more service. One thing I do want to dive into before we get into the nitty-gritty of the Q1 data that we're analyzing here is Decisive. Just so everyone knows, Decisive, this is on VMRS level, and Decisive has VMRS encoding, right? So you have a technology there that is encoding it at the VMRS level to really give us copious amounts of data to look at truck service. Can you tell me about that system and maybe how it's evolved? Because we all know AI is evolving rapidly. How is that system working today?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we've been partnering with you for a couple of years. We've been running this VMRS encoding model to encode the code key 31 system value for several years and been helping to put that information out into the industry in a variety of ways. I may have mentioned in the past that we've always been looking for ways to improve the service effectiveness through the quality and availability of this VMRS data. And we've incorporated that code key 31 system encoding model directly into our platform so that we can get it into the hands of as many people as possible through a variety of mechanisms. Now that these values are embedded directly, they're more readily accessible to the fleets and dealers alike within Decisive SRM, as well as our suite of reports. Starting with Q1 this time, we've developed and trained an updated version of the model that can now identify a larger percentage of those unencoded operations. The model currently looks at various data elements entered in the service case to find additional references to the type of service operation performed. And as time progresses and new users, dealers, and operations are performed within our ecosystem, we'll continue to look for opportunities like this to make sure that encoding model continues to classify operations at the highest and most reliable ways possible.
Right. So this is a behind the scenes thing, right? You're looking at a lot of the service data. It's putting the correct VMRS code in there. How have you seen this grow over, again, it's been some time that you've been doing this and growing it. How are these encoded operations helped you see more of the service data and analyze it as it's been coming in?
Simply put, the new model provides a great amount of more accurate data. The previous model was pretty impressive and had taken the VMRS encoded population from around 10 to 15% of operations. And that was with dealers kind of encoding those things and putting high quality data in there. With our previous version of the model, we were able to get all the way up to like 65 to 75% of operations having an encoded value in that code key 31 system field. The result of greater encoding precision, this new model adds service activity information across all 25 of those VMRS codes that we track. The new model has noticeably increased the number of encoded operations in several of the VMRS systems, such as O34 lighting, O13 brakes, and O17 tires. The increase in these encoded operations was around 6% or so, additional operations that are now falling into these, new categories with the updated model. And with the O18 wheels, rims, hubs, and bearings system code, the increase was even substantially larger. So with this latest data from Q1, our analysis is based on an even more extensive data set than we've had in the past. This analysis now presents an improved view of service costs and service activity for deeper activity and trend analyses. And for an accurate comparison, the service volume data from prior quarters was also adjusted to include these additional encoded operations. So we have a better, apples to apples comparison when we're looking over different periods of time.
Perfect. Yeah, because you already got ahead of my next question, right? Because now diving in the Q1 data, it was breaks with a bullet. I feel like the charts here go up, like the chart stops and the break line, I feel like keeps going. We've seen a huge increase in break activity and break service activity in Q1. What's your thoughts on what's going on regarding breaks?
Yeah, you're definitely right. That break service activity was very interesting. Definitely one of the highest increases in year-over-year service volume that we've ever seen. And for this particular one, year-over-year for breaks was at 93.6% higher than the previous year. This kind of jump definitely catches our attention. When we talked last quarter, we had seen an increase, but not of this magnitude. At the time when we were researching it, we found that there's a large amount of service attributed to a large ABS recall by one major manufacturer. As it turns out, that recall service carried into Q1 in a substantial way.
Right, because going back to, I feel like I remember talking about the recall, and maybe that was 2 or 3 quarters ago, and we were waiting to see it, and we hadn't seen it yet. But boy, did it pop out here, and definitely interesting to see how that played out. Looking at all the data, right, excluding the recall. So if we take the recall, okay, that's impacting the data. There was a big service issue there. Do you see breaks as still a factor in the service volume in Q1? Is it routine maintenance, or was it the recall really driving that huge increase?
Yeah, when we kind of looked a little bit deeper, took those recall operations out as best as possible, when we started to look at those quarter over quarter and year over year volumes, we're still seeing an increase in both of those categories. So when I removed those ABS recall break operations, breaks were still up 12% quarter over quarter, and they were up 8.4% year over year. So looking at the previous, kind of 3 quarters leading up to the last 2, things were relatively flat in that, 013 breaks category. They might have been up or down 1% to 2%, but staying pretty steady at around 80,000 plus operations happening in there. But even when we took out the recalls here, being able to see that, 12% quarter over quarter and 8% year over year jumps, still kind of showing that breaks have been a big driver of service activity recently.
For sure. What else are you seeing in Q1 data? I mean, I think power plant jumped up to me. We've seen a little increase there. Anything else catching your attention in terms of the components that are being dealt with in Q1?
Well, when we were looking kind of across the board, service volume increases were seen in about 20 of the 25 VMware system codes that we're tracking, and that's up from 13 systems posting increases last quarter. In terms of those 25 VMware systems that we track, power plant, as you mentioned, was definitely one of the big ones. That was up 19.3% of all operations, or accounted for 19.3% of all operations, with the highest volume of activity for the 4th consecutive quarter. Also in the top 3 systems, based on operation volumes, were breaks at 14% of all operations and exhaust at 10.6%. Like we talked about earlier, no surprise that the highest increase in service volume this quarter were for breaks at 48% up quarter over quarter. We're also increasing for the quarter were power takeoff at 13.4% higher, general accessories at 11.7% higher, and lighting systems and power plant were both up around 10.2%. As it turns out, only breaks were among the top 5 VMware systems for 2 quarters in a row. In the latest quarter-over-quarter analysis, only 4 VMware systems posted decreases in service activity, and those were tires, tubes, liners, and valves, transmission, manual, clutch, and exhaust system. So all 4 of those were ones that actually decreased this most recent quarter. And clutch was the only one to show consecutive quarterly declines in service volume.
Right, and I did notice too, because one of my pet projects, I think that we latched on to early, was that AMT automated manual transmission service trend. I did notice in the data this time seems a little bit flat. We saw kind of relative large increases over the past, let's say, 6 quarters as we've been talking about this, but it seems like that had evened out a little bit there. Am I on track with the AMTs?
Yeah, definitely on track. That one seemed a little bit more stable and wasn't as drastic as a change as some of the other systems that we've talked about up to this point.
Right. It'll be, you mentioned power plant, you mentioned the exhaust, which goes in the after treatment as well. Again, Q1 2025 data, so still early yet in the year. But given all the things that are going on surrounding all the different legislation changes, the engine after treatment, emissions changes, will be super interesting to track this data going forward here into the next year as well to see how fleets are dealing with maybe some older equipment, some equipment they're hanging on to. So, Nick, always appreciate you taking the time. I always learn a ton. We'll talk to you again next quarter.
Sounds great. Look forward to it.